Do you know how people say family is the safest place in the world? That's a lie, the biggest one I've ever heard. Because it was inside my own home, in that little pink-painted bedroom with stuffed animals on the shelves and my childhood drawings taped to the wall, that my brother did things to me that even the devil would have been ashamed of. And my father worshipped that boy. To him the sun rose and set on my brother. Even now, at 71 years old, I can still hear that raspy voice barking, "Stop making up stories, girl, always making things up." As if the baby that grew in my belly when I was just 14 was some kind of fantasy. My name is Linda Hayes, though most folks these days just call me Miss Linda. I was born in 1953, right here in Coldwater, Kentucky. Back then, children had no voice, and girls had even less. Girls were expected to be quiet, obedient, and grateful. But here I am, on the porch of my small but decent little house, this blazing July afternoon, finally sharing the story I kept buried for almost 60 years. It isn't a pretty tale. It's the kind of story that churns your stomach, the kind you want to block your ears against. But it has to be told, because I know there are young girls out there right now walking through the same fire I did, believing they're alone. And if you're listening to me, I'd like you to write in the comments where you're from. I want to see how far this story travels, whether folks across America are hearing me. And please, if you can, give this video a like and subscribe. Every like, every comment gives me strength to keep shining light on what so many try to sweep under the rug. I remember it clear as glass, the first time I realised my family wasn't just strict or difficult, it was broken. I must have been 7, playing house in the yard, when I heard my father shouting at my mother inside the kitchen. Nothing unusual, he shouted all the time, but this was different. "Stop babying that girl, Marie. She needs to learn who's in charge around here, me and Daniel." Daniel, my brother, 5 years older than me. Tall from the time he was 12, dark-haired, with green eyes that didn't come from anyone in the family. The neighbours used to say he was so handsome he'd break 100 hearts. What none of them knew was the first heart he shattered was mine. My father, Henry Hayes, was the kind of man born with ideas that belonged in another century. He believed men never cried, that daughters were worthless compared to sons, that women were put on earth to serve. He worked at the steel mill, always came home reeking of whiskey and smoke. If he was in a good mood, he pretended I didn't exist. If he was in a bad mood, you'd better pray you were invisible. My mother, Marie Hayes, bless her soul, tried. Hair always pinned back in a tight knot, her palms rough from endless laundry jobs. She did her best to shield me, but against Henry there wasn't much she could do. "Stay quiet, darling," she'd whisper when his voice thundered through the house. "It'll pass. Just stay quiet." We lived in a cramped 3-room house, one main room, my parents' bedroom, and a small back room that I shared with Daniel. At first, when I was little, we got along. He taught me how to climb trees, to fish in the creek behind the house, even how to whistle. But things shifted as I grew older. It started subtle. A hand brushing too long, a stare that lingered. I didn't understand. I was just a child. I thought it was normal for a brother to hug his sister a little too tightly, to crawl into her bed even though his was right there. Sometimes my mother would step in at night and scold him. "Daniel, back to your bed." He'd mutter excuses. He was afraid of storms or cold or mist being little. And my father, he thought it was wonderful. "Look how much they love each other. That's a real family." He clapped Daniel on the back, proud of how close we were. After all, Daniel was his golden boy. He played ball, swore, drank just like Dad. Mirror image, partner in crime. Me, I was the unwanted one, the daughter born when they prayed for another son. My father made no secret of it. "That one's a mistake," he'd laugh to his friends, pointing at me. "But what can you do? God's will." The first real warning came one Easter Sunday. I was 9, dressed in a yellow dress my mother had sewn. Family filled the house, cousins, uncles, aunts. Everyone kept saying how pretty I looked, how grown up I was becoming. Harmless compliments. But Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes darkened. He crushed his soda cup in his fist until his knuckles turned white. Later, while everyone was outside barbecuing, he pulled me aside. "Think you're so pretty, huh? Trying to get attention?" I was baffled. I wasn't trying to get anything. I was just standing there eating cake. But he leaned close and whispered, "You're mine. Got it? Mine. Don't you dare look at anyone else." Mine? Brothers don't claim sisters like that. But in that instant, something shifted. His eyes were different, possessive, dangerous. And even though I didn't fully understand, I felt it. Fear, cold and heavy, crawling up my spine. I tried to talk to my mother later. "Mum, Daniel's acting strange with me." She froze, hands buried in soapy water. For 1 second she looked at me, and I knew. She knew. But I also saw the terror in her eyes, the same terror I felt. "It's just in your head, sweetheart," she said softly. "Your brother loves you. He just wants to protect you." And she turned back to the dishes, scrubbing as if she could scrub away the truth. That was when I learned something awful. I was alone. My father was on Daniel's side. My mother was too scared to act. And me, just a 9-year-old girl trapped with a monster who slept in the bed 3 feet away. Things got worse. He started barging into the bathroom while I showered. "Forgot my towel," he'd say, standing there watching. I'd shrink against the wall, trying to hide. "What's wrong? I'm your brother. You don't have to be shy." I started bathing in my clothes, locked the door. Still, he'd find ways in. He'd kick the latch and claim he needed the toilet. My father would blame me for breaking things. Nights were worse. He'd slip into my bed, stroke my hair. "You're so beautiful," he'd whisper, "prettiest one in the family." I'd squeeze my eyes shut, pretend to be asleep, pray he'd go away. Sometimes he did, more often he didn't. When I turned 11, it went beyond anything I'd feared. On my birthday, my mother baked cornbread cake with strawberry jam. Just the 4 of us sang. No party, no friends. My father tossed me a second-hand doll. "Too old for this nonsense," he scoffed. Daniel handed me a cheap plastic necklace, all dramatics, calling me my beautiful little sister. He hugged me in front of them, too long, too tight. His hand lingered where it shouldn't. I shot my mother a desperate look. She turned away. That night he came again, only this time it wasn't just touching. "You're a young woman now," he whispered. "Time to learn." I trembled so hard the bed rattled. I tried to scream, but he clamped his hand over my mouth. "Shut up. If you make a sound, I'll tell Dad you've been messing around with that boy from the store. You know what he'd do to you." And I did know. I'd seen him beat my mother half to death just for smiling at a delivery man. So I stayed quiet, bit the pillow, tried to vanish while Daniel did things I still can't put into words. The pain was unbearable, but not worse than the betrayal, knowing nobody would save me. The next morning I could barely walk. My mother noticed. "What's wrong, Linda? Why are you limping?" I lied, said I fell. She didn't press. But later, when he wasn't looking, she dabbed ointment on me with trembling hands, silent tears running down her face. Still, not a word. From then on it became routine. 2, 3 nights a week, sometimes more. I learned how the mind escapes when it must. I'd picture myself flying, soaring far above, anywhere but in that bed, beneath that weight. And my father? He kept boasting Daniel was the finest boy he'd ever seen. The 2 of them, my father and Daniel, would stumble home from the bar, arm in arm, loud and drunk, singing off-key. "This here's my boy," my father would bellow, so the whole neighbourhood could hear. A real man, not like that dull little girl Linda. By then I was wasting away. I stopped eating right, stopped speaking much. At school, teachers would ask if everything was fine at home. I'd force a smile and nod. Yes, everything's fine. What else could I say? Who would believe me? Daniel was everyone's golden boy, handsome, polite, always willing to help. He carried groceries for the widows on our street, tossed a baseball with the younger kids, even charmed the church ladies. Nobody suspected that behind closed doors he was a predator. There was one day I nearly told someone, Mrs. Carter, our neighbour. She was different from the others, never married, worked at the library, lived alone. The other women whispered about her, called her unnatural, said she wasn't respectable, but she was always kind to me. "Linda, sweetheart, you don't look well," she said one afternoon, finding me crying behind the church. "What's going on?" The words were right there on my tongue. My brother. He does things. But then I pictured my father's face, his fists, the way he broke my mother for less. I froze. "It's nothing, Mrs. Carter. I just fought with a friend." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she let it go. Years later, after everything had already come crashing down, she sought me out and whispered, "I knew, Linda. I knew, and I didn't help you. Please forgive me." And I did forgive her. What could she have done back then? Nobody talked about such things. Family matters stayed buried, carried like a curse in silence. When I turned 13, my body started to change. Breasts budding, hips rounding. My first period came with no warning and terrified me. My mother handed me a few old rags and said, "You're a young lady now, be careful." Careful of what? I was already living in constant fear, and it never protected me. If anything, Daniel grew bolder. My changing body made me, in his eyes, some sort of prize. The nightly visits became more frequent. Sometimes he didn't even wait for the house to sleep. He'd corner me in the pantry, in the shed, in the bathroom. "You're getting pretty," he'd murmur. "Soon the boys will come sniffing around, but don't forget you belong to me." I wasn't a person anymore. I was property, his possession, branded and claimed. And worst of all, everyone seemed to silently agree. My father used to joke, "Daniel will decide who you marry one day. He knows which boys are decent, Linda." If only he knew the only hands that had ever touched me were his son's. The breaking point came one blistering December afternoon. My father was at the plant. My mother had gone to the river to wash clothes. I was home alone, or at least alone with Daniel. "Come here, Linda, let's make use of the time." I bolted, but he caught me by the hair, dragged me to the room. This time I fought. For the first time in years I fought back. I clawed, bit, kicked, but he was stronger. He always was. "Think you're tough now," he snarled. "I'll teach you a lesson." That lesson left me bleeding worse than ever before. When it was over, he looked at the blood on the sheets, shrugged. "Clean that up before Mum gets back." But I couldn't move. I lay there in the crimson mess, wishing only for death, praying to disappear. That's how my mother found me. Her scream, sharp, shattering, still echoes in my head. She rushed to me, cradled me like I was still a baby. "Oh God, my child, my baby, forgive me." Something inside her broke that day, or maybe it finally healed. She washed me gently, then bundled our clothes into a sack. "We're leaving," she said firmly. "Where, Mom?" "I don't know, but we have to go." But we didn't make it. Just as we reached the door, bags in hand, my father stumbled in, reeking of liquor. He stopped, taking in the scene, his face hard. "What's this nonsense?" My mother tried to explain. She stammered, wept, begged, showed him the bruises, the blood. He listened in silence, then turned to Daniel, who was standing behind him. "That true, son?" Daniel shrugged. "She's making things up, Dad. You know how girls are. Probably jealous 'cause I've got a girlfriend now." And my father believed him, or pretended to, or simply didn't care. With one swing, he slapped my mother so hard she crumpled to the floor. "Stop covering for her. Want to leave? Leave, but the girl stays. Somebody's got to cook and clean around here." My mother looked at me, and I saw it the exact second she gave up. On me, on herself, on everything. She dropped the bag and walked back to their room. We never spoke about it again. Life dragged on. The nightly visits never stopped. My body kept being violated. My soul kept withering. But something inside me shifted. I wasn't that little girl anymore, sobbing into a pillow. I was a survivor, and survivors do whatever it takes, even if inside they're already gone. That's what it means to live in a house where the monster wears a crown, where the queen is too broken to protect her child, where screams vanish into the walls. That's what it means when family feels like hell. And the worst was still ahead. 1965 began differently. On New Year's Day, I woke with my stomach churning. Not from celebration, we never celebrated anything, but from nausea. I thought it was food poisoning. I didn't realise that nausea was about to change everything. January passed, the sickness didn't, always worse in the mornings. My mother noticed, of course. Mothers always do. "You eating bad food, girl?" she asked. I shook my head. Bad food? We barely had good food. By mid-February, it hit me. My period hadn't come in months. At first I brushed it off. My cycle was never regular. But then I added up the missed months, the nausea, the sore breasts, the strange cravings. No, it couldn't be. But it was. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, whispering to myself, counting on my fingers. December, nothing. January, nothing. Now February was half gone. 3 months of carrying something inside me. The terror was so strong, I threw up on the spot. Not pregnancy sickness this time, pure fear. I was 14 years old, pregnant with my own brother's child. How could I tell anyone? My mother already knew about the abuse and kept quiet. My father would blame me, say I tempted Daniel. What would he do once he found out? So I decided to hide it. I wore baggy dresses, my father's oversized shirts. I bound my belly with strips of cloth until it hurt. Anything to hide the swelling, but you can't conceal a pregnant child's body for long. My mother was the first to truly see. One morning in March, she walked in while I was changing and froze. My rounded stomach, the marks on my skin, the swollen chest. It was all right there. Her face went pale. "Linda, my child, are you?" And I broke. For the first time in months I sobbed. Not the quiet tears I'd mastered, but raw, body-shaking cries. "Mum, I didn't want this. I swear I didn't. He always—" She pulled me close, clutching me so tight it hurt. We wept together on the cold wooden floor, 2 broken women bound by the same nightmare. Finally, she whispered, "We have to tell your father." Ice ran through me. "No, Mum, he'll kill me." What else can we do? Soon it will show. We can't hide it. She was right. At 4 months it was already hard to disguise. At 5 it would be impossible. But my terror outweighed logic. "Just a little longer, please." She agreed. She was as afraid of him as I was. Still, she began to care for me in secret, saving scraps of food, brewing teas to ease the nausea, rubbing oil on my belly to soften the scars. And Daniel, unbelievably, he didn't notice, or didn't care. He kept sneaking into my room, doing what he always did, blind to the fact my body was changing, that every touch now ripped through me with pain as the child inside me grew. April came, and with it my desperation deepened. The swelling was impossible to hide now. I clung to a shawl like armour, even under the suffocating Tennessee sun. At school I pretended it was for a bad back, and that's why I hunched forward when I walked. Teachers nodded, choosing to believe, or pretending to. But home was a different story, and in May everything shattered. That night my father stumbled in drunker than usual. He fought with my mother over the cold stew, hurled 2 plates at the wall, and kicked the dog. Tony tried to calm him, but even the golden sun couldn't succeed this time. "Where's Jessica?" he roared. I hid in my room, whispering silent prayers that he'd forget me. But luck abandoned me. The door splintered beneath his boot. He found me curled in a corner, clutching the shawl over my belly. His gaze slid from my face to my stomach, back again. "Take it off," he growled. My hands shook as I loosened the cloth. The 5-month curve showed clearly beneath the thin dress. The silence was worse than rage. His face darkened, purple with fury. His eyes bulged. "Whose is it?" he hissed. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. "Whose child is this?" His voice was low, deadly. My mother tried to step in. "John, please!" His hand cracked across her cheek before she finished. "Shut up!" Then his fury returned to me. "Always knew you'd turn out no good. Who was it? That boy from the store? The butcher's kid? How many of them, huh?" His words slashed deeper than any belt. At 14, carrying my brother's child, that's what my father saw in me. "Dad, it wasn't— don't call me that," he spat. "I'm no father to a—" Tony appeared in the doorway. His eyes swept the scene, and in a second he understood. But what burned on his face wasn't fear or guilt. It was rage. "What's happening here?" he demanded. "Your sister." My father pointed at me like I was filth. "She's pregnant." Our eyes met. He knew I was about to speak. He saw it in my face, and he decided to strike first. "I knew it," he said coldly. "I saw her sneaking around with Mike from the gas station. Tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen." Mike, 16, barely knew my name, but the lie was enough. "That bastard!" my father roared. "I'll kill him!" He stormed out, swaying but determined. Tony followed, not to stop him, but to make the story stick. I was left with my mother. She stared at me, pity and despair tangled in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell him the truth?" "Would it have mattered?" I whispered. "Do you think he'd believe it?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Hell followed. My father went after Mike, raving, threatening, humiliating his family. The boy's parents swore on their lives he had nothing to do with me, and they were right. But the damage was done. Rumours, violence, shame. 2 weeks later, Mike's family packed up and fled. An innocent boy had paid for Tony's crime. And me? I became the disgrace. The fallen one. The girl who ruined the Randall name. My father stopped looking at me altogether. My mother cared for me in secret, though always with that weary, burdened gaze. Tony became the hero, the brother who protected the family's honour, the one who warned our father about his sister's wayward ways. At night he still crept into my room sometimes. Not as often, he called me spoiled goods now, but he came. And when he did, he'd whisper in my ear, "This baby's mine. Don't ever forget it." June crawled by. July was worse. My belly stretched tight, the baby restless inside while I shriveled within. My father pulled me out of school. I won't be humiliated any more, and I became a prisoner at home, carrying another prison in my womb. Church was my only outing. My father insisted I attend, so everyone could see my shame. The women whispered, shook their heads, pointed. I sat in the back pew, shawl pulled low, praying, not for forgiveness, but for strength, for escape, for a miracle. By August, 8 months gone, I could barely walk. Feet swollen, back screaming, belly heavy as iron. My mother, a part-time midwife, tried to prepare me. "It'll be hard. You're too young, too small, but we'll get through," as if she could carry my burden. As if she could share the weight of delivering a child who was also my nephew. At dawn in September, the labour began. A knife in my back, a gush of water down my legs. "Mamma," I called softly. She rushed in, took one look and nodded. "It's time." The hours blurred into agony. 16 of them. I bit a rag to stifle the screams, terrified of waking the men. My mother boiled water, whispered encouragements, prayed under her breath. But the baby was breech. Her hands trembled as she tried to turn him. "Holy Mary, help my girl," she pleaded. By the end I had nothing left. "One more push, Jessica, just one more." Through a final wave of fire he came. A boy, small, perfect, dark hair, pale skin, and when his eyes opened, they were green. Tony's green. My mother cut the cord, cleaned him, swaddled him, then laid him on my chest. And in that moment, something unexpected surged through me. Love. Fierce, devastating, unconditional love. That child was innocent, untouched by sin, deserving of protection. "What will you call him?" my mother asked. Before I could speak, the door creaked open. My father, Tony behind him. They saw the baby, me, pale and trembling. "It's a boy," my father said, a flicker of pride crossing his face before hardening again. "Doesn't matter, a son is a son." Tony stepped forward, gazing at the child. A strange smile flickered. Guilt? No. Possession. "He's a fine-looking kid," he said. His eyes gleamed. That baby was proof of his power. "Charles," my father declared. "He'll be called Charles, a man's name. Maybe he won't take after his mother." And just like that, my son had a name, Charles Randall. No father listed. Mike was long gone, and no one dared write the truth. Afterward, the house shifted. My father pretended Charles didn't exist. My mother tended to us, exhausted but steady. Tony prowled, watching, hovering. "He's mine too," he whispered once. "No," I snapped. "He's mine. Only mine." But deep down, I knew the truth. In that house, nothing belonged to me. Not my body, not my child, not even my life. The milk came slow. Charles cried, hungry. I cried with him. My mother tried herbs, massages. Nothing worked. It was Mrs. Johnson, our neighbour, who saved him. She appeared with a tin of formula, insisting it was leftover from her grandkids. A kind lie. "Take it, John," she told my father. "The child's innocent." And so Charles survived, on charity, formula from Mrs. Johnson, clothes left mysteriously at the door, a blanket here, a bottle there. Some in town pitied us. A few tried to help. But inside our house, the cruelty only deepened. My father drank harder. His fists fell faster. My mother seemed to shrink into herself with every passing day, while Tony began making plans for a future that terrified me. "When the boy grows up, he'll be just like me," he would boast. "I'll teach him everything. He'll be my partner, my blood." The fear that those words ignited in me was worse than any bruise or broken bone I had ever endured. My son. He wanted to mould my son into another version of himself. A monster in the making. No, I couldn't allow it. I would sooner die than let him succeed. That was when the idea of escape took root in my mind. I was only 15, alone, with a baby barely 3 months old. No money, no safe place to run, no allies. But I had to try, for David, for that tiny life who deserved freedom, who deserved a chance to be good, not corrupted. The real question was how to break out of a prison where your captors slept only a few feet away. How could a child protect another child? The answer eventually revealed itself, in a way I never expected, and it would alter the course of our lives forever. But that revelation hadn't come yet. For now, the thought of running never left my head. By December, David was feeding well, almost sleeping through the nights. He was strong enough to come with me. So one afternoon, with my father at work, Tony off playing basketball, and my mother busy hanging laundry in the backyard, I seized my chance. I wrapped David in a blanket, stuffed a grocery bag with his tiny clothes and a can of formula. No suitcase, no belongings, just desperation. I crept to the gate, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might burst through my ribs. 1 step onto the sidewalk, 2, 3. "Where do you think you're going?" I froze. My father's voice. He hadn't gone to work at all. He'd been waiting, watching, as though he'd known I would try. I turned slowly, clutching David tightly to my chest. "I was just taking him for some fresh air." The slap landed before I could finish. I collapsed on the pavement, shielding David with my body as he wailed in fear. "You really thought you could run off with that bastard?" He dragged me back by my hair, locked the door behind us, and pocketed the key. From that day forward, I was no longer just trapped. I was a prisoner in every sense. January of 1966 was suffocating, the air thick with heat and dread. David was growing fast, each new feature making him look more like Tony. Those sharp green eyes, that stubborn jawline. I loved him more than life itself, but every resemblance was a knife twisting in my chest. Tony grew bolder, insisting on holding him, making silly faces, trying to bond. I wanted to vomit each time, but I couldn't always stop it. My father encouraged it. Let his uncle spend time with him, he'd say. A boy needs a male figure. If only he knew what kind of figure Tony truly was. One afternoon, I overheard Tony bragging to a friend, "When the kid grows up, he'll be my right hand. I'll show him everything, girls, booze, all the fun stuff. He'll be a real man, not soft like one raised by a woman." I went cold. He wasn't talking about fishing trips or baseball. He was talking about raising another predator. My blood boiled over my dead body. That February I tried again. This time I waited until everyone was deep asleep. Quietly, I pried open the bedroom window with a kitchen knife. First I pushed David through, then squeezed myself after him. We were almost free when a neighbour's dog barked furiously, waking half the block. Windows lit up, curtains pulled back. My father appeared at the front door, furious in his underwear. "Catch her!" he bellowed. I ran barefoot, clutching David, running blindly through the dark streets. His cries echoed with mine, a chorus of terror. At last, I crouched behind the church, praying for daylight, praying for a miracle. But miracles never came. My father, Tony, and 2 of their friends found me easily. Small towns leave nowhere to hide. The beating that followed nearly killed me. They hit me until my body went limp. When I woke 2 days later, I was swollen, bruised, barely able to open my eyes. "Next time I'll kill you," my father promised coldly. "And the brat too." I believed him. The hatred in his eyes was too real to ignore. If I tried again, I wouldn't live to regret it. March dragged on, then April. I moved like a ghost through the house, caring for David, cooking, cleaning, obeying. Tony still crept into my room at night when he felt like it, though less often now. "You're still mine," he'd whisper. "Doesn't matter how many kids you have. You belong to me." The dread of another pregnancy haunted me constantly, but there was no way to stop him. Locks meant nothing. Screams only brought more violence. Then in May I met Rosie. She was my age, newly arrived from New York with her family. Her father was a banker, educated, different. She wore trousers, swore under her breath, even smoked in secret. At first I thought she was reckless. Then I saw she was fearless, everything I wanted to be. We started speaking after Mass. She asked once, "How old is your son?" 8 months, I answered. "And his father?" "There is no father." She gave me a look that said she understood more than I admitted. She didn't judge, didn't gossip. Instead, she kept showing up at my house with excuses, borrowing sugar, asking for recipes. My father distrusted her. "Not a decent girl," he said, but my mother defended her presence. "It's good she has company." They never guessed Rosie was helping me plan. She told me about shelters in New York, places for women like me, safe houses where questions weren't asked. "But you'll need money," she warned, "at least enough for a ticket and to get by until you find work." Money. Always the impossible barrier. Where could I get it while locked inside like a prisoner? The answer came from where I least expected. By June, the town was preparing for Independence Day. Parades, fireworks, endless barbecues. My father insisted we attend for appearances. He dressed me in a gingham dress with a ribbon in my hair. David wore a tiny patriotic outfit. At the festival, while my father laughed with his drinking buddies and Tony flirted with girls, I slipped away to a bench with David. He squirmed restlessly at the noise, and that's when she appeared. Mrs. Laura Whitman, the mayor's wife. elegant, wealthy, childless. Everyone knew she longed for a baby. "May I hold him?" she asked softly, her eyes glistening. I hesitated, then handed him over. She cradled him with such tenderness that David, usually wary of strangers, quieted instantly. He even smiled. "He's beautiful," she whispered. "So, so beautiful." We sat there in silence, her rocking him, me staring at my hands. Then she spoke again. "It must be hard so young doing this alone." "It is," I admitted. I didn't have the strength to lie any more. "If you ever need help, anything at all, please come to me." Her eyes held genuine kindness, not the shallow pity of church ladies. For the first time in a long time I believed someone meant it. From then on, Mrs. Whitman helped me in secret. Care packages, baby clothes, a little money now and then, always discreetly. My father assumed it came from church donations. I began hiding every dollar she gave me, tucking bills into the mattress lining, beneath diapers, inside shoes. Penny by penny, I built my escape fund. July passed in a blur. David was crawling now, babbling, "Mama." When he said it for the first time, tears poured down my face. It was proof that I was more than a girl trapped in hell. I was his mother. By August, I grew restless again. I tried packing one night, but Tony caught me. "Going on a trip, sis," he sneered. "David has a fever. I was going to take him to the clinic." Liar. He pressed me against the wall, his hand tightening around my throat. Not enough to kill, just enough to remind me that he could. "If you ever try running again, it won't be my father who kills you," Tony sneered. "It'll be me and the bastard. We can always make another one, right?" That was the breaking point. I could survive beatings, insults, humiliation, but not a threat to my son, to Charles. My escape bag went back under the bed. My plans crumbled. For now. September arrived, along with Charles's first birthday. I managed to bake a small cake with the little flour I had. We sang quietly, careful not to upset my father, who hated fuss. Charles clapped his chubby hands, smeared frosting all over his cheeks, laughing with pure delight. For a fleeting instant it was just me and my boy celebrating life, but reality always clawed back. That night Tony staggered into my room, reeking of whiskey. "It's been a year," he muttered, staring at the crib. "A year since my son was born." He laughed then, a cruel, empty laugh. "Not yours." "Look at him, his jaw, his eyes. He's me." "Get out," I snapped, but he only laughed harder. "Nothing here belongs to you. Not this room, not the light outside. You're mine, always mine." He grabbed me. I fought, but drunk as he was still stronger. Charles woke, crying from the noise. "Shut him up," Tony growled. I tore free, ran to the crib, clutched my son to my chest. Behind me I felt Tony's shadow. "Good to see my family together," he slurred. "Mother, son, and one day he'll know. One day I'll tell him who his real father is. Then we'll be a real family." My stomach turned. That was it. Holding Charles tight, I swore to myself I would escape, even if it killed me. I'd save my child from this nightmare. The chance came sooner and darker than I ever expected. October began strangely. My father seemed diminished. He spoke less, drank less. His skin turned yellow, his eyes hollow. My mother noticed too. "Something's wrong with John," she whispered while washing dishes. "He won't eat. He's not himself." But concern was weakness in our house, so nothing more was said. Then one morning, screams tore through the walls. I ran, clutching Charles, and found my father convulsing on the floor, foam at his mouth, his body stiff and jerking. My mother knelt, helpless. "Call for help!" she cried. Tony rushed in, pale with real fear for the first time in his life. He bolted for the pharmacist. By the time the old man arrived, it was over. My father's body lay still, eyes glassy. "Massive heart attack," the pharmacist declared. Nothing to be done. And just like that, John Randall, the man who terrorised me my entire life, who let every cruelty happen, was gone. I expected grief, or relief, something. Instead, there was only emptiness, as if the heavy chain I carried for years had vanished, and I didn't know how to walk without it. The wake happened that same afternoon in the suffocating heat. Relatives I'd never met filled the house, muttering empty condolences. They painted him as a hard but fair man, a devoted father, an honest worker. Lies, lies everyone wanted to believe. Tony stepped into his father's shoes immediately. He shook hands, took charge, relished the authority. At the cemetery, as dirt fell onto the coffin, I realised the truth. My father's death was not just an ending, it was my chance. Across the grave, Tony's eyes met mine. He was holding my mother, playing the role of dutiful son, but when no one else looked, he smiled. A thin, private smile that said everything. Now I'm in charge. Now you belong to me even more. But he didn't know. Didn't realise that as the coffin disappeared into the earth, I was already plotting freedom. For myself, for Charles. To me, John's death wasn't a tragedy. It was deliverance. In the chaotic days after, visitors streamed in and out. My mother wandered like a ghost without her master. Tony strutted, revelling in his new title as head of the house. Meanwhile, I worked silently, planning every step. Rosie visited on the third day, unconcerned by propriety as always. "So, you going to take this chance?" she asked. I glanced at Charles toddling unsteadily across the floor, babbling nonsense. 14 months old, bright, beautiful, and too good for this cursed home. "I will," I whispered, "but I have to be careful." The plan was simple. Wait for the will, claim my share, and vanish. Rosie had a cousin in New York who rented rooms to young women. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. But then the lawyer read the will, and everything collapsed. My father had left everything to his son. The land, the house, the savings. For my mother and me. Only the right to remain, provided Tony allowed it. "That's not fair," my mother protested. "The law allows it," the lawyer said flatly. Tony's smug smile burned into me. Now it was official. He owned not just the land, but us. That night, as Charles slept beside me, despair pressed heavy. How could I run with nothing? No ticket, no food, no way to start again. Then I remembered Mrs. Wilson, the mayor's wife, who once whispered that if I ever needed help, she'd be there. The next day, I lied that I needed medicine for Charles. My mother, too broken to question me, let me go. My heart pounded as I hurried to the mayor's grand home, clapping at the iron gate. Would she turn me away? But she came, elegant, smiling faintly. "Clara, what a surprise. I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you, Mrs." "Wilson, I need to talk to you." She read the desperation in my face and ushered me in. In her fine living room, Charles in my lap, I told her, everything I could manage without choking, that I needed to leave, that I feared for my child's future. She listened quietly, then sighed. "I always suspected," she murmured. "Small towns whisper, but I never had proof." "Please," I begged. "I don't need much, just enough for a bus ticket, just to start somewhere safe." She thought for a long while, then finally said, "I can do better. A friend of mine in Washington, D.C. runs a boarding house. She needs help in the kitchen. Room and board included. It's not glamorous, but it's safe. Washington, D.C. My heart leapt, far enough that Tony would never find me. "Yes, please, I'll take it." "And the fare?" She smiled softly. "My gift." Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to fall to my knees in gratitude, but she added one condition. "You must leave and never return. No letters, no word. My husband can never know I helped you. Do you understand?" I understood. If the mayor found out his wife had aided the town's disgraced girl, it would ruin her. "I promise," I whispered. "No one will ever know." For the first time in years, I walked away lighter. I had a plan. I had hope. I just had to act before Tony caught on. The next few days turned into a quiet storm of planning. I packed only what mattered: clothes for Daniel, papers, and the little savings I'd hidden. One travel bag. A whole life reduced to a single bag. Rosie did what she could. She checked the bus timetables, mapped the safest route, and explained where to stop. She even showed me how to use a phone booth, how to ask strangers for help without giving too much away. "The city's different," she said. "You've got to stay sharp. Don't trust everyone who smiles at you." The date was set, November 3rd, 1966. Departure, 4 a.m. Mrs. Wilson sent money for the tickets through Rosie, along with a recommendation letter for a friend in Washington. The night before, sleep wouldn't come. I kept studying Daniel's face as if I could etch it into my soul. His sandy hair, button nose, soft, plump hands. My son, my treasure. The one who would finally see the world outside those suffocating walls. At 3 a.m, I rose carefully, dressed him while he slept, and shouldered the bag. I crossed myself. The house was still. My mother's faint snores in the back. Tony gone for his Friday visit to the brothel. Tiptoeing through the living room, every creak felt like thunder. Daniel stirred in my arms, muttering in his sleep. I soothed him, whispering. Almost at the door, then a voice. "Really leaving?" I froze, turned. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway, hair tangled, nightgown wrinkled, her eyes swollen from tears. "Mom?" "I know," she murmured. "I've always known, but I never had the strength. Your father—" Her voice cracked. "Why didn't you protect me?" The words escaped me, years of buried anger flaring in a single question. She dropped her gaze. "Because I'm weak. Always have been. But you're not. You're strong, Elena, stronger than I'll ever be." We stared at each other, mother and daughter, two women walking different fates. Then softly, "Go. Don't look back. Take care of him. Give him the life I couldn't give you." I kissed her cheek, wrinkled, smelling of soap and salt tears. "Goodbye, Mum. Goodbye, my daughter." The night air was sharp, almost cutting. Daniel pressed against me, slipping back into sleep. I hurried through empty streets, each step tearing me further from that prison. The bus station was dim and small. Rosie was there waiting, loyal as always. "I thought you weren't coming." I almost didn't. My mother, she knew. She always knew. Rosie nodded. No words needed. Between women, some things are understood without speaking. The bus hissed to a halt, coughing black smoke. The driver, a thick-set old man, barely glanced at my ticket. "Washington, eh? Long ride. 18 hours if she holds together." 18 hours. 18 hours to put miles between me and hell. I climbed aboard, juggling baby and bag. 6 passengers slumped in restless sleep. I chose a seat by the window. Daniel was awake now, his wide eyes taking in the strange new world. Rosie came to the steps, squeezed my hand. "Take care of him, take care of yourself. And once you're there, forget this place, start over." As if it were that simple. "It's not simple," she said, "but it's necessary. You both deserve better." The driver honked. Rosie ran down, waving as the bus pulled away. I waved back, tears burning. We passed the little houses, the church where silence suffocated me, the graveyard where my father rotted. Oakridge slipped into shadow, becoming memory, becoming past. "Look, Mama, lights," Daniel giggled, clapping tiny hands. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going far, far away." He laughed, blissfully unaware of the nightmare we'd left behind, the predator who'd wake to find his prey gone. Tony's rage flashed in my mind, but with it came relief. He wouldn't have to share his inheritance or bother with his sister's child any more. He'd find another victim soon enough. Men like him always do, but I wasn't one of them any more. The highway stretched endless before us, dawn smearing the horizon with pink and orange. Daniel slept against me, his little fist tangled in my blouse. 18 hours to shed my old skin, to bury Elena Rivers and rise as someone new, someone without chains, without fear. The bus rattled through towns and fields, stopping at nameless stations. Each mile felt like a victory. I nursed Daniel, his green eyes, his father's eyes, locked on mine with absolute trust. But to me, they were just his eyes. Beautiful eyes of a boy who would grow up free. Rosie's sandwiches tasted like liberation. Night fell again. Finally, just before midnight, the driver announced, "Next stop, Washington, D.C." I peered out the window, bright lights, towering blocks, wide roads, a world completely alien. I inhaled deeply. New life began here. No looking back, as Rosie said. No fear, as my mother never managed. Just Daniel and me, against everything. The bus jolted to a stop. My legs ached as I rose, clutching Daniel close. The terminal was vast, buzzing with people, loud and alive. I felt tiny, invisible, perfect. I found a payphone, dialed the number Mrs. Wilson had given me. "Good Hope Boarding House," a woman's voice answered. "Is this Mrs. Martha? Mrs. Wilson sent me. Elena Rivers." "Yes, dear, I was expecting you. Take a taxi to this address." A taxi. I'd never taken one before, but I would learn. Big cities don't give you a choice. The driver, kind and middle-aged, lifted my bag. "First time in D.C.? You'll like it. Plenty of chances here." Chances. That's all I needed. The boarding house stood in a quiet residential street, a simple building but clean. Mrs. Martha was at the door, silver hair, apron around her waist, warm eyes. "You must be exhausted. Come in. I've prepared your room." The room was modest, but it had the essentials. A narrow bed, a makeshift cradle for little Charlie, a wooden dresser, and a mirror. To me, it felt like luxury compared to what I had endured. The kitchen was downstairs. "You'll start tomorrow," Mrs. Martha told me. "I can manage. Of course I can." Good. Meals are served 3 times a day, breakfast at 6 sharp, lunch at noon and supper at 7. Wages are weekly, with room and board included. I nodded at every word. I would do whatever it took. That first night in Washington, in a strange bed with Charlie sleeping soundly at my side, I finally let myself cry. Tears of release, of terror, of fragile hope, for all I had survived and for what still lay ahead. The city outside slept. A planned city, clean, modern, humming with promises. A place where no one knew me, where my past carried no weight, where I could shape myself anew. I chose to be Jessica Smith, a simple, forgettable name, a young widow whose husband had died in a workplace accident. One more among the countless migrants who arrived daily, chasing the dream of a better life. And in a way, it was true. I was migrating. I was chasing something better, just not for a lost husband. That part of my life was buried in Oak Ridge. My future began in that cramped little room in a foreign city, with my son beside me and freedom almost within reach. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours. That was enough. Washington was both my salvation and my test. The first months at Mrs. Martha's boarding house were grueling, but in a different way than before. It was the fatigue of honest work, not the terror of survival. I rose at 5, kissed Charlie as he slept, left him in Mrs. Martha's care, and went to the kitchen. Preparing breakfast for 15 boarders was no small task. Stacks of toast, eggs fried by the dozen, steaming pots of coffee. Then came the clean-up, followed by lunch, beans, rice, roast meat, then cleaning again, then dinner. In between, I darted upstairs to nurse Charlie, change him, hold him close. And you know what? It was good. Hard, sweaty, endless, but mine. No one laid hands on me without consent. No one barged into my room. No one hurled insults at me. I was simply Jessica, the quiet, diligent cook. Charlie thrived. By 18 months he was running through the halls, entertaining the guests. He became the soul of the house. Even stern Mrs. Martha melted for him, and the maids quarrelled over who got to play with him. For the first time, my boy had something resembling a family. Imperfect, makeshift, but real. 1967 slipped away quickly. I saved every penny I could, dreaming of leaving the boarding house to rent even a tiny place of our own, our sanctuary, free from curious stares and probing questions. But in 1968, life shifted again. A new boarder arrived, Mr. Robert, a retired government clerk, a recent widower in his early 60s. Polite, soft-spoken, a man who came and went, never staying long. He noticed Charlie quickly. It was hard not to. By then my son was 2, chatty, bright-eyed, his green gaze captivating. Robert started leaving little gifts, a toy car, a picture book. I thanked him politely, but I kept a wall between us. Men who seemed overly kind always made me suspicious. But Robert was different. He never crossed a line. He simply talked, told stories, knelt to play with Charlie. Slowly, cautiously, I let myself trust him. He spoke of his late wife, lost to cancer, of children who lived far away, of the loneliness pressing in. "You remind me of my daughter," he told me one evening, "the same steel in your spine." One afternoon, when Charlie fell and scraped his knee, Robert appeared with a first aid kit. "I was an army medic," he explained as he cleaned the cut, humming a silly tune to distract him. Watching them, something shifted inside me. I saw not a threat, but a grandfatherly soul, aching for family as much as we did. Our friendship grew at its own pace. Sometimes he'd join me in the kitchen, peeling potatoes while reminiscing about the Kennedy years, the civil rights marches, the nation's fragile hopes. I listened, absorbing, daring to dream. Then one evening he made a proposal. "Jessica, I have a townhouse in Georgetown, too large and too empty since my wife passed. Why don't you and Charlie move in? You care for the house, cook meals, and I'll pay you fairly. It's not charity, it's practical." My heart leapt. A house? To leave the boarding house? It sounded unreal. "But what will people say?" I asked. He chuckled. "Let them gossip. I'm too old to care. You need stability, I need company. This is business, nothing more." I hesitated, but when I confided in Mrs. Martha, she only nodded. "Robert is a good man, Jessica. I've never seen him act improperly." And so, in March 1969, Charlie and I moved into his townhouse. It was modest but spacious, 3 bedrooms, a small yard, everything tidy. For the first time in his life, Charlie had his own room. Life settled into a rhythm. I cooked, kept the house, while Robert went out in the mornings and returned in the evenings. We dined together, then drifted to our separate corners. Respectful, balanced, safe. But Charlie didn't understand such boundaries. He claimed Robert as his grandfather. Grandpa Rob, he called him, shadowing him around the house, begging for stories, flashing his drawings. Robert, bless him, adored it. He was the one who taught Charlie to ride a bike, who took him to the park, who pointed at passing planes. "See that one, Charlie? That's a Boeing." Watching them, my chest tightened. This was what a family should look like. Affection without harm, care without a hidden price. Everything I'd been denied, my son was receiving. But in 1970, change came. Robert's health began to fail. Heart trouble. I managed his pills, his diet, his rest. He teased me. "You're worse than a drill sergeant." "It's for your own good." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I listen." One day, after a hospital scare, he held my hand. "Jessica, I need you to promise something, if anything happens to me. Don't talk like that. Listen. If it happens, I want you and Charlie to keep the house. The papers are ready." I protested, overwhelmed, but he insisted. "My children don't visit. You and Charlie are my family now. Let me give you this." I cried, not for the property, but for the kindness. for being seen as a person, not an object. For once, someone wanted to shield me, not break me. Robert recovered somewhat, though he grew frailer. I moved into the next bedroom so I could hear if he needed me. Charlie often slept curled between us, safe in the cocoon we built. In 1971, I enrolled him in kindergarten. 5 years old, sharp as ever, marching off in his blue uniform with a gap-toothed grin and a tiny backpack. My pride, my miracle. "Mum, why don't I have a dad?" he asked me suddenly one night. The question froze me. I'd known it would come, but I wasn't ready. "Your father died when you were very small," I said gently. "How?" "A work accident." "Was he nice?" I drew a deep breath. Yes, he was. A lie, but some truths wound too deeply to share. Charlie accepted it for now. One day I knew I would have to weave a fuller story, memories that never existed, anything but the reality. 1972 arrived with the election frenzy. Robert bought a colour television, a marvel then. Together we watched every broadcast. Robert, me, Charlie, and even a few neighbours squeezed in. When Nixon won re-election, Charlie painted his face red, white and blue, running outside with the neighbourhood kids. Happy, normal, free. As I watched him laugh under the evening lights, I thought of Oak Ridge. Did it still exist as I remembered? Was Tony still there? Was my mother alive? I pushed the thoughts away. That life was over. I was someone else now. Jessica Smith, single mother, cook, Washington resident. My past was gone. But in the quietest hours of the night, it crept back. In dreams where Tony found me, where he dragged Charlie from me, where the nightmare began again. I'd wake drenched in sweat, rush to my son's room and hold my breath until I saw him safe, sleeping in peace. In 1973, Charles turned 7. Mr. Robert threw him a birthday party, cake, balloons, the whole street of kids invited. I took photos with the little camera he had given me, snapshots of rare, fleeting happiness. That year, something shifted between me and Mr. Robert. It was not romance. I never wanted that, and he never tried. It was deeper, an unspoken alliance, a family forged day by day in mutual care and affection without demand. But his health declined. That winter, hospital stays became constant. I juggled nights at his side with mornings caring for Charles. Neighbours helped, teachers understood. It was the first time I felt held by a community. One night, his voice barely above a whisper, he told me, "Jessica, you were the daughter I always wanted, and Charles, the grandson I never had." I held his hand, tears falling, and whispered back, "Thank you for everything." He passed that September peacefully in his sleep. The funeral was simple. His sons came, cold men in dark suits, questioning me, questioning why their father left the house to me. They saw only scandal. A housekeeper turned heir. But the will was clear, the papers in order. The house became mine and Charles's. They left with threats but never returned. For the first time in my life, I had something solid, a home, a future. Charles grew bright, curious, full of questions I could only answer with carefully woven lies. To shield him, I built walls of stories, each one another brick in the fortress of silence that kept him safe. At night, I wrote in secret, filling notebooks with memories too dark for him to ever know. Years passed, school, adolescence, his first love, his first triumphs. And then Georgetown, civil engineering, the career he claimed as his own, but rooted in the ghost of a father he never knew. Pride swelled in me, even as the lies pressed heavier on my chest. Charles became everything Tony never was, honest, hard-working, gentle. Proof that nurture can triumph over blood. He married Claudia, built a family, gave me grandchildren, Mary Claire, a doctor, John Robert, an engineer, Alice, dreaming of writing her own stories. My greatest joy was watching them live in the light, free of the shadows I carried, but shadows never vanish entirely. One night in 1986, the news showed Oak Ridge. The town still stood, modernised, thriving. For a moment I wondered if he was there still, if he had done to others what he once did to me. Then I turned off the television. Some doors must remain closed. Now I am 73. My Charles is a grandfather too. My family flourishes, unaware of the darkness from which we escaped. Sometimes Alice asks me to write memoirs. I laugh it off, pretending my life holds no adventure. But here, on this channel, I finally speak. Why now? Maybe because my time is short. Maybe because silence grows heavier with age. Maybe because other women need to know the truth. There is always a way out. A door, a window, even a crack in the wall you must claw through with bleeding hands. But there is a way. The miracle was never in money or chance. The miracle was believing I deserved more. Charles will never know. Some truths are not gifts. They are curses. I gave him a different inheritance, a hero for a father, even if only imagined, because every child deserves hope, not horror, and if loving him meant lying to him, then I would choose that lie 1,000 times over. If you've listened this far, thank you. Share this story, not for me, but for the women still trapped in their own basements. Let them know survival is possible, that life after hell is possible, that miracles are possible, miracles we create ourselves. My name was once Jessica Randall. Today I am Jessica Smith, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. I am the woman who chose love over hate, life over death, silence over destruction. And if I had to choose again, I would not change a single thing. So goodbye, Oak Ridge. You will never own me again. And hello, forever, to the new life I built, with my son, with my family, with love. That is my story. Our story. A story of survival. A story of miracles. Not miracles granted by heaven, but the kind we make with our own hands.